send Judge Koenig's regards and disappointment that she could not join us this evening, as well as to recognize two other members of the bench in attendance this evening, Judges McCormick and Hillman. Thank you very much for your participation as well. We look forward to speaking with you. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to our first interview pair, Sandra Lake, President of the Ingham County Bar Association, who will be interviewing Justice Elizabeth Welch. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Emily. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing and helping you to get to know Justice Elizabeth Welch, who was elected to the Michigan Supreme Court in November of 2020 and assumed her role as justice in our Michigan Supreme Court on January 1, 2021. Prior to joining the bench, Justice Welch ran her own law practice, specializing in labor and employment law. She also is a trained mediator and volunteered for many years for the West Michigan Dispute Resolution Center. I suspect that will come in handy now as Justice of the Supreme Court. She and her husband, Brian Schwartz, have 4 adult children. Their oldest son is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, and their 3 other children in college right now. It's my pleasure to welcome you and to thank you for being with us tonight. I have to warn you, I've done a couple depositions today, so I hope it doesn't sound like I'm deposing you. As I went through some questions to ask you, I thought, oh gosh, it sounds like I'm going to give a deposition. And I certainly hope that I don't make anybody cry.
Thank you, Sandra. It's really nice to meet you.
So let me start early on. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, Sandra. So I grew up in Grand Rapids. I am born and raised, proud West Michigander. I am one of those kids who grew up in Grand Rapids when it was a sleepier little town. Left for a bit and came back, and it's a great place to live. So when you're a kid growing up here and you hear it's a great place to raise a family, that's often a cue that you want to leave, but then you indeed realize that it's true. So yeah.
Tell us something that stands out about your childhood.
I talk about this a lot. My parents were divorced when I was very young. I was at 1970s. That was sort of starting to happen more. And Mom, we were living in Texas when I was about 2 to 5 years old. My dad worked for Steel Police, a West Michigan company, Police of Texas. And then after they got divorced, he actually moved to France for several years. So I did get to see him there, but we moved back to Michigan, and my grandparents actually were really instrumental in my life. So every day after school, really through 8th grade, I went to my grandmother's house every day after school. She played a really, really significant part in my life. And she just passed away a couple of years ago. She was 95. I think that's something that of who I am.
And was there something that drew you to the practice of law?
You know, it's funny. I was recently invited to be on the Lady Justice podcast. The Chief Justice does a podcast, if folks don't know. It's really well done with other female justices around the country. And it's interesting. All the people on the podcast are not from lawyer families. I'm actually not either. I'm the first one in my family to go to law school. I think I initially had sort of an interest in politics. I actually volunteered a whole bunch for then Congressman Paul Henry back in the 80s, a wonderful man. And I sort of saw a pathway to working on important issues through law school. So that's, I think, how I initially sort of got pulled in. And then as I got into law school, I realized I really liked other areas of the law. Like many of us, you go for one reason and often discover there's other things you like as well. So that's sort of the journey and how I ended up in law school.
So I'm curious, how was it like campaigning during the era of a pandemic where you can really only reach out to voters via online?
Yeah, so Sandra, it was interesting. So we kicked off the campaign. I kicked it off about a year. I mean, a lot of folks may know this, but judicial campaigns are just a strange beast to begin with. We can't start fundraising until February of the election year. You can start working. You have to use your own money, but I built my website and did some initial preliminary things because it was a statewide race. So I knew I needed a whole year. And my plan was to get to all 83 counties in person. I was going to completely model. Jocelyn Benson is a good friend. She did that. And I was going to try to model that sort of campaign plan. I did pretty well. I got to about 35 before the whole world sort of went to stay in place. So I was on the road every night. I had a brand new hybrid Ford Escape, and I got 10,000 time before we even went to stay in place. So I was on the road mostly back and forth to Metro Detroit a lot, but everywhere in between. So I was doing all that. Then of course our whole road team was really overnight. It's really interesting. At first, I've been using the Zoom platform for probably about 5 years because of some national work I do on justice issues and national groups. So I knew it was a great platform. And I tried to get people who had all these meetings, I would say, whether it was bar associations or different groups, I say, have you considered using Zoom? I mean, we could really still meet. And everybody at first delayed everything. They said, well, let's just reschedule. So everybody kind of thought, oh, this will just be a few weeks. So I was like, oh. So it actually worked out well. I had 6 to 8 weeks where the kind of came to a standstill. My law practice, because I practice employment law, mainly busy. Some of the longest hours I worked in my entire professional life because of all the COVID protocols that impacted my clients and unemployment issues and everything else that affected the workplace. But then slowly, took about 6 weeks, people started gradually coming back online and going to Zoom. My nights turned into 8 to 10, I think the highest amount, maybe 15 meetings a night on Zoom. It was click, 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 click. Finally, I got to the point with my staff, I was like, I have to have time. Because I would start at like 5, and it just would go straight through till about 10 o'clock. So I will tell you, I mean, as much as that was rigorous, it was nice to be home when I was finished. The hard part was when you're on Zoom, it's not like you have downtime in the car, or you can catch up on emails or phone calls. So that's at 10 o'clock, and I still had a lot to do. So, but we met so many people. I literally could go from, Marquette to Royal Oak to Grand Rapids to Weddington all night.
So how has it been being on the bench in this era of Zoom and oral arguments?
Yeah, so as I tell, like my own son who is starting a new job when he graduates from college, he's very, very lucky. He's got a job lined up, very lucky. He is going to be starting his job on Zoom. And I said, yeah, you, me, and everyone else who's starting a new job. So I have yet to have oral arguments in the Hall of Justice. I took office effective January 1. And my first oral argument was January 5th and 6th, basically. January 6th, I think, was our first. So that was New Year's Day. If folks remember, New Year's Day fell on a Friday. And my first official day was basically January 4th. And 2 days later, I had oral arguments on Zoom. So I obviously was spending December. I hadn't officially taken office yet, but spending a lot of time getting ready for those. And it was on Zoom. I think probably, Sandra, because I have spent so many hours on Zoom the past year, whether campaign or work related, it didn't feel that strange. It has become our new normal. I mean, obviously we miss sort of the energy of the courtroom and all of that, but it actually works pretty well. I mean, I think for appellate practice, it works pretty well.
Is there anything particular that is your goal to accomplish, or an area where you think that there needs to be improvement?
Yeah, I spoke really openly on the campaign trail about the need for gathering better data. We already knew this. Justice Brent has been working really hard with the juvenile justice system and trying to move the needle on that. We know there was something called the Joint Task Force on Pretrial Incarceration. Our Chief Justice coached at the Lieutenant Governor. There are 18 outcomes from that report. The final report is the need to get consistent and accessible data statewide. That task force did a snapshot of the pretrial system, but it's not an ongoing thing, and we need to get that data. We really need sentencing data. Who's sitting where and why? And I think that if we could get that and aggregate it, we would have a better snapshot of what's going on in our criminal justice system. So that is something I'm working on. A lot of national interest in this topic. There's a lot of philanthropic interest. I will tell you, when I was on the campaign trail, it came up almost every night. I mean, people are really talking about this issue. So that's one that's high priority for me.
Well, I want to thank you, Justice Welch, for spending a little time with us and sharing a little bit about your background and your goals for being on the Supreme Court. As the president of the ICBA, I thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with everybody.
Thank you both. That was very enlightening. I realize in my excitement to hear from the justices, I neglected to introduce myself. So my name is Emily Jefferson. I am a board member of the Ingham County Bar Association and the co-chair of the Meet the Judges Committee with Steve Sinus, who we will hear from a little later on in the program. But the next pair we have is Ron Berry, the president of the Clinton County Bar Association, who will be interviewing the Honorable Michelle Rick. Welcome and thank you both.
Great to be here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ron Berry. I have the privilege and distinct honor to interview Judge Rick. As most of you know, if not all of you, Judge Rick was recently elected to the Michigan Court of Appeals. She's representing the 4th Judicial District, and she just began her term in January, and that, of course, that it would expire in 2027. Judge Rick served as a trial court judge at the 29th Circuit Court since from 2007 to 2020. Before that, Judge Rick worked as a private practitioner before going into her career in the public service. That service included being an assistant prosecutor, a senior assistant attorney general for the state of Michigan, and deputy legal counsel to Michigan's Governor Jennifer Granholm. She's a graduate of Michigan State University, go Green.
Go White.
And a graduate of University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. Judge Rick is married to her college sweetheart, Matthew, and they have 4 children. Thank you, Judge Rick, for attending tonight and being here to speak with us.
It's really a pleasure, and it's great to see you again, Ron. I miss you.
I miss you as well.
Thanks.
So to go ahead and just jump right into some of these questions, if you could just let everybody know, where you grew up.
Sure. So I hail from northern Michigan. I grew up in Gaylord. My parents, who both came from very large families, were raised in Bay City. And while I was born there, I was a toddler when we moved up to Gaylord. My dad had graduated pharmacy school and began his practice and co-ownership of a pharmacy up there. Mom stayed home and did her best to take care of us kids. And I say that because, these were the days when you could hop on your bike and ride anywhere and do just about anything. And life was very serendipitous and very safe. So she didn't always know where we were, but we didn't get into too much trouble. I have no record.
That you'll tell, right?
Yeah.
So, well, in that aspect, what memories do you have about your childhood, or could you tell us about your childhood beyond, that kind of environment?
Sure. Well, in addition to working very early in age at my dad's pharmacy, emptying trash bins and things like that, I was very active in our local music theater in the summers. I also taught swimming lessons at the county park in Gaylord on Otsego Lake. And many of my friends who also taught swim lessons were also involved in music theater. And so it really was a nice way to spend the summers. I was very active in forensics and debate in school, as well as being on the cheer team. And I attended Gaylord St. Mary's, which is a parochial school, but we had classes not only at St. Mary's, but because it was so small, also at Gaylord High. And that gave me an opportunity to make friends at both schools. I think that one thing I share with my kids, and they're probably sick of me talking about it, was that at the time that I was growing up, um, we went to Disney World once and it was for a day, and we drove to Florida and back. It was a very humble vacation for us. But my regular summer vacations were spent at my parents' deer camp. They have 60 acres up in the UP, in the westernmost part of the UP. So we would spend our summers shooting guns, picking berries, swimming, and using an outhouse because there was no running water. So again, my kids, they are, I tell them all the time how spoiled they are, because, you know, while those memories, you know, were certainly a different era, you know, I still cherish them. I think that we had great fun. And so, you know, I think that's where my love of Upper Michigan comes from.
Well, we'll definitely have to talk about forensics debate. I have that. I had that in common with you. I never knew that, so we'll have to talk about that sometime. So, what kind of hobbies do you have right now?
Well, you know, sitting in a room on Zoom, but really, I love to read, and I read a lot, particularly now in this era, things that pertain to the law, to equal justice. An author that I'm reading again is Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow, and I'm also in the midst of Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? I love to appreciate wine. And when we don't have a pandemic, I do enjoy, you know, taking trips and doing wine trail events up in the Traverse City area. We do travel quite a bit, although again, not right now, but I'm looking forward to, again, having the opportunity to venture not only into Northern Michigan, where we spend a lot of time in the summer on the weekends, but also head someplace warm when it's safe.
So what made you go into the legal field?
I was a very scrappy kid who liked to argue. And I think the seed was planted probably by one of my teachers in junior high. I don't necessarily have a particular memory, though not too long ago, I ran into one of my former teachers from junior high, and he recalled us having such a conversation, not only about going to law school, but also becoming a judge.
So transitioning into that, to the extent you can, what, if anything, would you like to see changed with your now being on the bench, or any particular goals you may have?
Well, one of my other hats that I wear is I teach a class called Access to Justice, and I teach that at Detroit Mercy Law School. And, you know, we talk about how can we better innovate and become efficient as a system, but we also look at the social justice side of things, and particularly as it relates to equality and equal treatment under the law. In answer to your question, I think because of me wearing those two hats, you know, there are some things that I am very anxious and hopeful for. One of them pertains to the changes in expungement laws. And in fact, I have some students who, as part of their pro bono requirement that I have for my class, are going to be working with the Michigan Indian Legal Services in hopes of putting together a presentation on the changes in expungement laws, and also something that could be used like a toolkit so that practitioners across the state might be able to review those materials and kind of get the nuts and bolts, the how-to. I would like to see, as Justice Welch mentioned, that having served as an advisor to the pretrial and jail and pretrial incarceration task force, I would like to see some of the things implemented in terms of recommendations. There are a slew of recommendations that are working their way through the pipeline in terms of the legislature, and that's a very positive thing. I would like to see that come to fruition. And then finally, if I can make a pitch, one of the other things I do, I work and volunteer as a district director for the National Association of Women Judges. I've been involved for a number of years with NAWJ. I oversee activities in 3 states as a district director. And I'm really excited that in October of 2022, NAWJ is going to hold its annual conference in Detroit. And it's a really huge deal because we draw judges from around the world, and Detroit is uniquely situated so that we'll be able to work quite handily with our sister judges in Canada. So I, am looking forward to that. We were to have held the conference there this fall, and with the pandemic, everything got put on hold, but I think it buys us a little more time to really plan things the way that we want. I am looking for a contact for Lizzo. So if any of the people who are viewing have any entertainment connections to any artists from Motown or hails from Detroit, that's one of my to-dos, is to get a big name for the event. And if anyone would like to participate or in any way contribute, we are always looking for help, and people can get a hold of me at mrick@courts.mi.gov.
As for the next question, was there a certain point? Well, obviously there was a certain point, but what was the point at which you decided, I want to be a judge on the Court of Appeals?
Well, timing is everything. And the 4th Judicial District, there were 2 judgeships that were sunset by the legislature, that being Judge Fitzgerald's position and Judge O'Connell's position. So I had been watching that, and when I saw that my colleague, Judge Meter, was going to be retiring, I started talking with some friends of mine, including several people on the Court of Appeals, and we got a jump start. And what I really don't have a good sense when asked about how did it happen. I was the only one who ran for the position, but I do think that probably that jump start beginning the October prior, as Justice Welch mentioned, you can do a lot of planning and you can certainly do things out of your own wallet, but it isn't until February that you can start fundraising. And we had one fundraiser, and then the pandemic hit and everything was shut down, but miraculously, I was, delighted that all of the hard work that we had put in from about October till the filing deadline paid off.
And I think we're up against the time limit here, so I'm just going to go ahead and send it back to Emily. But thank you, Judge Rick, for letting us get that insight more about you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you both. And if anyone has a contact for Lizzo, I would also be interested in that. So thank you very much. Our next pair is Steve Sinus, my co-committee chair for the Meet the Judges Committee and fellow member of the Ingham County Bar Association Board. Steve Sinus, who will be interviewing the Honorable Shannon Schlegel. Thank you and welcome.
Can you see me?
I can see you, Judge. I am missing Mr. Sinus.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. Now we can hear you.
I've been here. I can't show my video. Okay. Okay.
Oh,
Now
there
the
you
host
are.
gave me. Okay. I'm sorry. I've been hitting the button, and Zoom has been telling me I can't use my video. But I think Matt just gave me permission. So, yeah. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I'm on the board. I'm an attorney at the Sinus law firm. I want to quickly also thank Madeline Lowry and Matt Hinkle and everyone else at ICBA for putting this together. Emily and I are the co-chairs, but it wouldn't come together without a lot of other people's help. So thanks to all the judges, and thanks to Judge Schlegel for being here and getting on the hot seat here. I'll briefly introduce Judge Schlegel. She was elected to the 29th Circuit Clinton County Court this last November. She got her bachelor's degree from the University of California, San Diego in 1994. Went to Thomas Cooley Law School and graduated in 2000. She has had a lot of different aspects of her career. She was a lawyer prior to becoming a judge, obviously, and she handled various types of legal work, doing business litigation, child welfare, civil litigation, estate planning, and family law, various forms of community service. She was on the Clinton County Agriculture Preservation Board, the DeWitt Township Zoning Board of Appeals. She was special prosecutor for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services in child welfare cases. So she certainly has had a diverse range of experiences, which obviously helps her become an effective judge. And I think everyone is very pleased to have her on the bench and replacing Judge Tavonen. So Judge Schlegel, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so let's get to the interrogation here.
Okay.
So I see that you went to college in California, but I want to know where did you grow up?
Well, that's a difficult question, only in that my dad was in the military. He's a Marine, Semper Fi. So I grew up in a variety of locations. So just for an example, between kindergarten and ninth grade, I was in 13 different schools. So I moved around a lot, lived in a lot of different places. If I had to, up until moving to Michigan, if I had to add up the years of all of my locations, Southern California tended to be my residence the longest. But I lived in a lot of different places.
Well, the next question was to tell us something about your childhood. And I think right there, you already told us a whole lot in terms of the experience of living in a military family. Obviously, that's a unique experience. But what else would you want to tell us about your childhood?
Sure. So I'm the firstborn. I have 3 sisters, so I'm the eldest of 4 girls. My parents were very young when they got married. My dad was in the military. We moved around a lot, much like what Judge Rick said and Justice Welch. My upbringing was very different than our world is today. You know, I was outside a lot. We played. Vacations were really just piling in the car and moving from one location to the next. So just a very different experience than what my daughter that I now have has now. But my childhood, I mean, it was a very good childhood. But just, you know, coming from a family where my parents were young, I'm the first college graduate in my family. I put myself through school, through working. My first job was at Kentucky Fried Chicken, but put myself through school and really, you know, the focus was enjoying family. Family is very important, and hard work. And so one of the things that my parents instilled in me was that through hard work and integrity, you can accomplish what you want to. You might have to have plan B, you might have to have plan C. Things may not always work out the way that you want them to in the beginning, but through hard work, you know, you can accomplish what you want to. So, so yeah, a little bit about myself.
That's great. I love the information that your first job was at KFC. You know, I think we think about judges, we want to know their legal experience, their academic credentials, but you know, maybe the real question is, what was your first job?
That's my first job.
that's awesome. With regard to, excuse me here, hobbies. You know, I don't know if you have hobbies that have changed throughout your life. If there are any particular hobbies you embrace now, tell us a little bit about your hobbies outside of law and work.
Sure. So I love being outside, and that was one of my challenges when I first moved to Michigan. I came to Michigan for law school and did not anticipate that I would end up spending my life here. And it's been a wonderful decision to do that. But winters, coming from Southern California, specifically San Diego, winters was something that I had to get used to, and start to learn some outdoor activities in the wintertime, because I really enjoy being outside. So I'm a runner. I've ran 3 marathons. That's just, running is just a great stress reliever for me. So that's something that I enjoy to do, but not really something that I like to do outside in February. So I've had to learn, I've taught my to ski, and I like to hike. I like to go camping. I love kayaking. Just all kinds of outdoor activities is what I like to do.
That's awesome. This wasn't on any list of questions you saw, but I'll just ask, did you meet Michael here in Michigan? Is that your husband's Michael, correct?
No, Mark, close. It's
I'm
an
sorry.
M name.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My bad.
That's okay.
I didn't have.
I
Yeah.
did. I did. So I met him through a friend of a friend. And no, he's not a lawyer. I get that question frequently. No, his business is sand and gravel. He comes from a family business. He's 4th generation owner of a family business. So something completely different than what I do, which for us works really well, that we're not both attorneys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why law though for you? Coming from a military family, this background of living all over the country, what drove you to want to go to law school all the way in Michigan?
Sure. So originally, when I was working towards going to college, my thought was journalism. So I love to write. I love to read. I love the law. Once I started my undergraduate work, where I was focusing on the journalism aspect, I found that I didn't quite enjoy it as a career, that it was a hobby, and turning that into my career just wasn't something that I was enjoying. So knowing that I love to write and knowing that I love the law, I decided to go to law school.
Nice. And so you went to law school, you were successful as an attorney out in your community. What sparked the desire for you to want to try to become a judge?
Just like what Judge Rick was saying, I don't necessarily think that there was ever a moment that I can pinpoint and say, this is when I knew that I wanted to be a judge. I do know that it's been on my radar for years, even when I was in law school. As a matter of fact, my husband just reminded me not all that long ago that over 20 years when we met, that was something that I said to him, that this is my goal. So I'm not real sure at what point that was what I decided I wanted to do, but I think it was affirmed in law school, in my trial advocacy classes. It's just something that was affirmed at some point that that's what I wanted to do. A lot of people may not necessarily know, but actually, when our Judge Martlew was here for Clinton and Gratiot County, and he was deciding to retire, and that left an open seat, which Judge Rick then was appointed for that. That was a seat that I had applied for, and I had not been an attorney for very long, I think only for 6 years. But I wanted to get out there and start that process and sort of find out what my colleagues thought of me, and to sort of set that in motion. Then in 2014, Judge Wells, who was our district court judge, he'd been our district court judge here in Clinton County for over 30 years, retired. And so that was an open seat. So not open for appointment, but open for election. And I ran for that seat. It was myself and now the Honorable Michael Clarizio. And we were shockingly the only 2 attorneys that ran for that seat, which was very surprising to us, and I think a lot of other people, because Judge Wells had been there for over 30 years. So I did not win that election. I didn't do horrible, but did not win that election. And at that time, this seat that Judge Tavonen had was also slated to sunset. And so for me, it was a real eye-opener as to what I was going to do, because from my view, it didn't appear I would have the opportunity to be a judge. The judges that were here, we're not terribly older than I am. And so it just didn't seem like something that was going to be an opportunity. And then in 2018, I got a phone call that, yes, that there was work moving forward to reinstate that seat. So as soon as that seat was reinstated, then I hit the ground running to start to lay that groundwork to run for the seat.
That's a great explanation. Thank you. We're going to knock up a couple of these, and I think I'm getting on the time limitations. But I would definitely want some answers to these last couple ones. What do you want to accomplish in a nutshell, if you can, as a judge, if you think about it, and kind of the big picture?
Yeah. You know, there's so much that's happening right now, and so many changes. At the time that I decided to do this, I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. We didn't know that there was going to be Zoom court or all of these things that are happening. I think that the innovation and creativity that is starting to happen now is fantastic. I think that that's something that needs to continue on. And so that's something that I'm hoping that I can be instrumental in. The equal access to justice is very important to me. So that's also an area that I'm going to be focusing on when I'm here. But I have 2 counties. I'm in Clinton County and Gratiot County. I have a lot to learn. So right now, that's my goal, is to focus on learning what I need to do. So then it's a positive experience for litigants and attorneys as much as possible.
And we'll kind of combine a couple of these. Basically, your usage of social media, your usage and feelings about Zoom, campaigning during the pandemic. Why don't you just give us some of those thoughts there, and we'll wrap this up at that point.
Sure. So I was very fortunate. Like Judge Rick, I ended up running unopposed. And so my campaigning, I think because I laid that groundwork a couple years prior to the actual election, that made a difference for me. I only had one fundraiser as well, and that was just before the pandemic. So prior to that, I had been in the community. I'm very active on the different boards and committees that I belong on. So I'm used to being out in the public. So that was it's a little different right now with the pandemic, that not being able to happen. In terms of social media, I was very active on social media. I think one of my friends said that my social media footprint was large. And so I'm trying to figure that out now, the best way to handle that, because it's a little different when you know you're going to run for office and you are making that social footprint, that social media footprint to capture all of these people that you're trying to reach versus now. So I'm not sure. I haven't quite figured out how to make those things work to where I'm accessible and visible to the public, but yet making sure that I don't do anything that creates a perception of a conflict of interest or bias, or even with the safety issues with my family. So I'm trying to figure those things out right now.
Yeah, that's a whole different reality that I guess the practitioners don't have to think about as much.
Yeah.
Well, if you have any other final thoughts, feel free to share them. I just want to thank you for being here, and I know that the legal community really welcomes your addition to the bench, and ICBA thanks you for taking part in this event tonight.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate being here. It is such an honor. It's such an honor to be sitting here. One that I'm very humble, and I'm so thankful. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that wraps it up, Emily.
Yeah. Thank you both, Judge Schlegel, for that inspiring story. I'm also a transplant to Michigan for law school, so I can empathize with the winter adjustment there. So thank you again for your participation. We have one more pair, and I know we got started a few minutes late, so thank you everyone for staying with us. The next pair is Brenda Basiga, the president of the Eaton County Bar Association, who will be interviewing the Honorable Kelly Morton. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Good evening, everyone. For anybody who doesn't know me, as Emily said, my name is Brendan Basiga. I'm the president of the Eaton County Bar Association. Much like Emily and Judge Schlegel, I am transplant, although not necessarily from California, mostly from Canada, actually, and I'm still not used to the winters. But regardless, it is my pleasure this evening to introduce the Honorable Kelly Morton. She was elected to the Eaton County District Court in November 2020. She comes from a very experienced litigation background. 17 years as a senior associate prosecutor for the Eaton County Prosecutor's Office. She started as a law clerk in Alpena County for 2 years, and then subsequently as a prosecutor there for a year before moving to Eaton County. She's married to Senior Assistant Prosecutor Brent Morton, and they have 3 kids, 15, 12, and 6. Don't ask me to babysit. In her spare time, she also acts as the secretary of the board of Siren, the Eaton County Shelter. I've had the pleasure of knowing Judge Morton for many, many years and being a wonderful thorn in her side as a prosecutor, and hope to continue to be so as a defense lawyer in front of her as she sits on the Eaton County District Court bench. In all honesty, I genuinely can't think of anyone better to succeed Judge Julie Reinke after her retirement. So thank you, Judge Morton, for being here, and I'll try to be nice with my questions tonight.
Well, thank you. That was, you said a lot of nice things that I hope I deserve, but I'm not so sure.
So in speaking with Judge Morton, this is for the panel and attendees, we opted to take a little bit more of a practical approach to these questions. So with that in mind, I'm just going to dive right in, if you don't mind, Judge. As a new judge, and particularly as an experienced trial lawyer, what sorts of things, what are your expectations of lawyers who appear before you?
Well, I think, I mean, obviously be on time, be prepared, but I totally understand that, you know, people are busy and sometimes double booked. So, you know, we appreciate an email or a phone call if you're going to be late, or, you know, move things if you have a conflict. Just things like, if you have filed a brief, I promise you I've read it. So when you're making an oral argument, focus in on the things that are really your best argument, or the things you want to make sure that I didn't miss. But I have read the brief, I promise you. And I want people to know it's okay to make mistakes, because I'm going to make mistakes. I have made mistakes, some funny ones. Recently arraigned somebody on an original charge and then found out they were there for a probation violation. So that was fun, but I'm sure those will continue. And I just, you know, I want my courtroom anyway to be a place where you can make a mistake. We're all gonna maybe laugh and move on, but that it's not the end of the world. And I really, you know, don't want people to be afraid to come there. So that's, and I also do expect people to work together. And I think that's one of the things that, as a trial attorney and a prosecutor for so many years, I think, you know, I learned over the years. I may have not started with this attitude, but, you know, you're going to need something from the other guy at some point. So if they're asking you for something, you should probably consider it, because next time you're the one that's going to be in need. And I also, you know, hope that people who, even in the most, you know, in a really serious argument where you disagree in the courtroom, that you can walk out and realize that everybody is just doing their jobs the best they can. And so we all need to remember that when we leave the courtroom, and, you know, be nice to each other.
I'll try to remember that.
You've said, I can say that you have done that in the past. I mean, we've certainly battled before, but
definitely.
You know, been fine after. So
I think it's been asked of the other judges, but it is certainly a burning question that I asked you when you started campaigning. But what made you want to be a judge? What was the spark there?
Well, I had been a prosecutor for a long time, and I feel like I helped a lot of people in that job, but I wanted something new. I wanted a new challenge. I really felt like I could help people in this job in a different way. And just, I feel like, well, one of the other things that was particularly appealing about this particular spot is that I do run now the domestic violence court for Eaton County. And the last 10 years or 12 years of my career were all, dealing heavily with violence against women cases. So when this spot came up, that certainly was a strong consideration for me. And I actually was one of the original organizers of this court 15 years ago when I was in district court and before I was actually the domestic violence prosecutor with Judge Reinke. So it just seemed to be all kind of the perfect factors coming together at the same time to do it. And, it was kind of now or never. Some things in life, I think, are like that, right? I mean, maybe I would have waited a few more years, but, it's looking around at the bench, I'm thinking a lot like Judge Schlegel said, now or never, because I don't, we have our bench is getting younger and younger, I think, so.
Well, I figured it was just because you got tired of wearing a suit and you wanted to wear a robe instead, but
I have to tell you that the robe is warm. I mean, I suddenly really realize why courtrooms are always so cold, because it's not always comfortable and it's quite warm.
Speaking of practical questions, any possibility of bringing space heaters into your courtroom at any point in time? No, not so much.
Well, they did put in all the new technology with the new, you have plugs at your table and stuff. So,
speaking of technology, actually, it's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. COVID, obviously, it's forced us to use Zoom quite a bit. I mean, this is a prime example. At some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, life is going to get back to some semblance of normalcy. I suppose my question is, in your view or your preference, would you prefer to maintain a Zoom presence, or are you looking to move back to more traditional, in-person type court appearances?
I really think we'll end up with kind of a hybrid of both. I do think there's something to be said, obviously, for in-person appearances. I mean, anybody who's been doing any kind of criminal practice and probably civil practice too knows that there are things people will do on Zoom that they would not do in the courtroom. Not wear clothes to court, for example. Not attorneys, but there are some things like that happen. And we had one guy who was the driver of his vehicle was ordering McDonald's during his hearing. So, things like that. But I do think it'll be a hybrid, because one of the things that I think Zoom has really done, practically, is allow people access that they may not have had before. I mean, our courthouse in particular is located not really where our heaviest population is. And the public transportation is not great. Once you get out of Delta Township, it doesn't run, it only runs till early after, maybe mid-afternoon. And it's not easy to schedule. And so I do think it's allowed people to attend that wouldn't otherwise have been able to. And one of the areas where I know we're seeing it is in landlord tenant cases, because people can Zoom in. And I have very few people who don't show up for those hearings. We're doing eviction diversion. We schedule like 5 cases every 15 minutes and all morning long on Tuesdays. And I have maybe 2 that don't show up every week, and everybody else is showing up. So, and I think it's true in all areas, but that's, the best example I can give is that people are able to get there, able to access the court in a way that they would not otherwise, they may not be able to access it all. So I think we'll continue using both. I do like to see people in person. I do also think that there are things you won't say to someone else when you're face to face that you might say over Zoom. So, so I hope that we're kind of doing a little bit of both.
Okay. Well, I'll be sure to turn off my cat filter next time.
Yeah.
I think just in the interest of sort of getting right to the almost to the time limit here, but this event obviously is wonderfully sponsored by the Ingham County Bar Association, as well as many other law firms. But speaking as a president of a bar association, are there certain things that you'd like to see bar associations do more of, like educational programs or social events or things of that nature?
Well, I assume we're maybe talking post-pandemic, because it does make it a little bit difficult. I mean, I know the Eaton County Bar Association has done some a couple of social or meetings on Zoom, but I mean, obviously, I think it depends on the size of your county and the size of your bar association. And, I do think that a lot of our bar members are also members of the Ingham County Bar Association. They offer a lot of educational opportunities, and we tend to be more of a social bar. I was the vice president and the president back and forth of our bar association for several years. And that's kind of really what I think our membership has wanted in the past, because they can get the educational piece from Ingham County. I do think the social is important because, again, I think it's important for us all to see each other outside of the courtroom and as people, and not just the other, the opponent. So I think that's important, but I'm not sure if any of this has been forwarded to you, Brendan, as the current Bar Association president, but the local Bar Association used to do things like for Law Day with the local schools, essay contests, scholarship type situations. And those are things that I don't think we see a lot of, trying to get people at a high school age or even younger interested in the law, at least interested in understanding what happens in a courtroom, or those kinds of things. So it would be nice to see that kind of come back into fashion, so to speak, that we would reach out to some of the younger people in our community and try to engage them a little bit, and not as defendants. So
Right.
Right.
Get the interest going as opposed to reactionary. So
Yes.
that being said, Judge, again, I want to thank you very much for being here. We appreciate all your help, your participation, and congratulations again on the election.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you.
Me too.
Thank you very much. It was very enlightening. Thanks again to Justice Welch, Judge Rick, Judge Schlegel, and Judge Morton, as well as Sandra Lake, Steve Sinus, I'm looking at the wrong list, Brendan Basiga, and Ron Berry, for your time this evening. We are almost ready to switch over to the breakout rooms, which, as you should have in your email, is a separate Zoom link. I also want to thank Steve Sinus as my committee co-chair for helping make this event possible, as well as Madeline Laurie, Matt Hinkle, and Madeline's team who, as Steve said, make this all happen. Thank you very much. I also want to thank our breakout room ambassadors, Sandy Lake, Lindsay Dangle, Alex Rissick, and Jessica Zimmerman, pardon me. They will be in the individual breakout rooms helping to moderate questions. I also want to thank our sponsors for their generous support. That is the Abood Law Firm, Chartier and Nye Fakudza PLC, Clark Hill PLC, Fahey Schultz, Burdick and Rhodes PLC, Foster Swift Collins and Smith PC, Fraser Trebilcock, Graywall Law PLLC, Hall Matson PLC, Loomis, Ewart, Parsley, Davis and Godding PC, Mallory, Latka, Scott and Sealand PLLC, Murphy and Spagnolo PC, the Sinus Dramus Law Firm, Speaker Law Firm PLLC, and Willingham and Cote PC. Thank you again for your generous support. If you would all transfer over to your the second Zoom link for the breakout sessions, we look forward to seeing you over there.